the supernatural.
Download the Legacy Edition of Spirit Blade, a full past audio drama, for free at spiritblade.com.
Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions, continuing still my celebration of UN-E3 2020, this time reacting a bit late to Xbox Game Studios' presentation. Last week I was on vacation with my family, and so I apologize I wasn't able to get this up sooner, but I want to give you my reactions to this, and specifically coming from the place of someone who was a big fan of a lot of games in the Xbox 360 generation. I own an Xbox 360. Loved a lot of my game experiences on that console. Have very little positive to say about the hardware itself. As many of you also experienced, I'm sure, that console was famous for its hardware failure, not just the Red Ring of Death, but also in my case, I had at least 2 consoles fail because of a disk read error, the open tray error, which is the lesser-known cousin of the Red Ring of Death. So I really moved back to PlayStation after that, and have been just wondering since then, is Xbox ever going to be able to win me back to them? And why is that significant? Well, because for me and many gamers, and specifically I'm coming at this from a Christian perspective, first off, we may just not financially have the resources to casually purchase 2 consoles, and second, whether we do or not, it's important as believers in Christ that we be living our lives intentionally, we be using our resources intentionally, and so it's a good idea to be thoughtful instead of getting caught up in hype, and figure out, you know, what console is really going to be useful to me in helping me unplug and rest so that I can, after that, engage in the other things that God has made me for. So I think we always want to be really intentional. So I'm not, in talking about it, I'm going to talk about whether or not I can see myself going back to Xbox in light of this event. And I want to be clear, I'm not trying to add fuel to the fires of Xbox versus PlayStation fandom and stuff like that. You know, I think we can totally enjoy both, but I think as believers who want to be intentional with our money, it may be the case for many of us that we will want to, or really need to, for responsible financial reasons, choose one console instead of both to purchase. And so that's kind of like the backdrop for why I'm going to be talking about this event in the way that I am. So, what from this event could potentially win me back to get an Xbox console, potentially instead of the next PlayStation console? Well, I've been playing Halo 3 just a little bit with my boys, not much. Halo Infinite was the first game that they featured in this presentation. And by the way, I'm only going to focus on the games that are really relevant to me. So I recommend seeing the presentation yourself and really listening to the wording as these games are talked about. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But anyway, Halo Infinite, I mean, I've only played a little bit of Halo 3, and this looked very similar to that. A graphical upgrade, of course, but the user interface and the type of gunplay, the types of enemies, it all seems very much the same. I can't remember if there's a grappling, there's some grappling where you grapple enemies and zoom up to them and punch them or melee attack them or something like that. And I don't know if that's new, if that was in 3, I don't think it was, or if it was introduced in a Halo game after that, but that was the only thing I could think of that was like, that looks significantly new in terms of gameplay, and so it just seems like they're playing it very safe. Although what I've heard, and I could be wrong about this, is that Halo Infinite is being designed as a platform, and that they have basically a 10-year plan for Halo Infinite, where it's going to be, like, you can call it a games as service if you want, I don't know if that's the right term, but basically a platform that they're going to be adding content to once you make the initial purchase to get Halo Infinite, whether that's going to be free updates or paid DLC, you know, all that, who knows. But anyway, I didn't see anything in this that was going to really grab me as someone who's not already like a Halo fan. But it seemed, just my first impression is that for people who are already fans of Halo and just want more Halo, this looks like what you're going to get. A little into the presentation, Phil Spencer, head honcho of Xbox, came on and said they were going to be, in this presentation, featuring 5 new first-party games that were going to be revealed for the first time. Unveiling, I think he said, of 5 new first-party games. And that language is really interesting to me. Usually when you talk about a first-party studio for a game console, you're talking about a studio that's making games exclusively for that console. You're not going to see first-party Sony games on Xbox. You're not going to see first-party Nintendo games on PlayStation 4, you know. But I question whether or not the first-party games are actually going to be exclusive to Xbox consoles because of the way that the wording was. You would think that if they were truly exclusive to Xbox consoles, they would say these are going to be playable exclusively on Xbox consoles, but they never used that kind of language, which I would think they would trumpet from the mountaintops if that is what they intended, because that's a big reason right there to get a current or upcoming Xbox console. One thing that Spencer said was, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the keywords are the same, we think it's just as important how you find and play your games as it is the device that you play your games on. And so I think this is very telling, because much of this presentation was playing up the fact that all the games that were being shown were going to be playable on the Xbox Game Pass service. It's a monthly subscription like a Netflix of video games that gives you access to a bunch of video games that you can play instead of having to purchase each one for $60, or as we see the next-gen games costing, it looks like $70 each. You can pay this one fee. I can't remember how much it is. I think it's less than $20 a month, maybe closer to $12.99. Let me actually look that up really quick. Okay, it's looking like for consoles, it's $9.99 a month after, you know, whatever trial price they might be offering. So, and it seems to me that that's really what they want people to connect with. Now, could these games that they talked about in this presentation actually be exclusive to the Xbox console? I think that's possible. Maybe they're not wanting to commit to that language yet because they want to see how much money they can make off of Game Pass and see if that's going to be more attractive. And if it doesn't work out as much, then they might still want to make money from their first-party studios by making those games available on other platforms like the PlayStation. So I don't know. It's, you know, but at least for now, they are not ready to say that any of these games are only going to be playable on Xbox consoles. But let's imagine sort of like I guess a worst case scenario for me as a PlayStation gamer where, you know, what if these are exclusives and it's really going to force me to choose between getting a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X console? Well, they've got In Exile, which has produced the recently rebooted or launched Wasteland series with Wasteland 2 and now the upcoming, or no, I think it's been released now, Wasteland 3, I can't remember. I think it's still about to be released. And then they have Obsidian, which showed some of their games in this showcase. And those are the 2 developers that would most interest me, especially Obsidian. And all the games in this presentation, including those featured by Obsidian, are available with a Game Pass subscription. And so that's a pretty big deal. They really were playing that up. They also, or Phil Spencer also said of the Xbox Series X that it's the most consistently powerful next-gen console. I found that very interesting. There's been a lot of talk about which console is more powerful. The architect behind the PlayStation 5 in the presentation that got into the nitty-gritty said that it's important to note that, you know, such and such specs are not, which Xbox had used when talking about their own console, are not necessarily an indicator of, you know, power and capability in a console. And so there's a lot of discussion that's been going on about, like, well, how, are we comparing apples and oranges here? And I think there is a lot of that going on. So they've used very specific language here, most consistently powerful next-gen console. I don't know what that means, but I think that because they're being so specific in their wording, I think it's probably safe to say that as far as power goes, both of these consoles are going to be great, and it's really going to come down to how each individual game is optimized for that system. If PlayStation 4 has a console that or PlayStation 5 has a console that is in a number of respects less powerful than the Xbox Series X, but their games are better optimized. They could end up looking and playing better than the games that are on Xbox Series X. You know, I think that's also why in this presentation they talked a lot about how these games will look and play best on Xbox Series X. So maybe they know that they can't on all fronts say their console is the most powerful with no caveats, but they're promising that the games, many of the games they talked about, will look and play best on Xbox Series X. So at the very least, I think we can say, you know what, either way you go, you're not going to be getting a weak, bad console by mistake if you choose one over the other. They're both going to be very comparable and great consoles in their own right. Okay, so The Outer Worlds, this is an Obsidian game which was released for multi-platforms last year, I want to say. And they've got a new expansion coming on September 9th called Peril on Gorgon. And there was no indication that this is only going to be available on the Xbox. In fact, they didn't even commit to saying that this expansion was going to be free for those who have Xbox Game Pass. Rather, those who are subscribing to Xbox Game Pass will get 10% off their purchase of this DLC. And again, that's coming September 9th. I really enjoyed the base game of Outer Worlds. I think I'll probably want to play it again and make some different choices to get more out of the experience before I purchase this DLC. But I'm going to be very interested to see how that launches, if there's any differences, any exclusive features to Xbox consoles, and just what they're planning on doing with Obsidian in general. That's going to be, right now, the main factor in whether or not I even start saving up for an Xbox console. Avowed is the next big Obsidian RPG, as they called it. And this is the big RPG that they told Microsoft when they were purchased by them that they wanted to make next. And it looks like, you know, a very generic kind of a fantasy CG trailer at the beginning, but at the very end of the trailer, it shows at least a representation of the gameplay perspective, which is first person, featuring a sword with runes on it in one hand, and a hand covered in purple flame of some kind of magical energy in the left hand. And so it's really giving off strong Elder Scrolls vibes. And I think that makes a lot of sense. This is the kind of thing I've wanted to see for several E3s now, since Bethesda has been so slow to prioritize the next Elder Scrolls game. And I think that it's like such a big hole in the industry right now for the types of big RPGs that Bethesda makes. We didn't quite get a replacement for Fallout in The Outer Worlds, but we got, I think, kind of like the next rung down, the AA version of a Fallout game. And I think that now that Microsoft has purchased them, there's a good chance that they're going to pump Bethesda's types of money into their future projects that are big open world RPGs. It makes a ton of sense to me that a Western game developer in Xbox, in Microsoft, would be especially interested in getting Western RPG developers. It's coming out for Xbox Series X. It did not say Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Windows PC. No date given. This is a ways out, but we've heard from, I think, several people over at Xbox that there won't be any exclusives for the Series X. There might be exclusives to Xbox consoles, but again, who knows what's going on there until it actually, rolls out. But we are not getting any exclusives to Xbox Series X for, I think, 1 or 2 years. And so this game is probably quite a ways out still, but they were just excited to let us know that they are working on it. And even if it's 2-3 years out, we're going to get it before we get the next Elder Scrolls game, based on what Bethesda has told us the last couple of years. It's described, Avowed, is described as an expansive first-person RPG. That still does not commit them to a game that's as big and wide as an Elder Scrolls game. You could call The Outer Worlds an expansive first-person RPG, even though it's not quite a big open world RPG in the sense of a Bethesda game. But I'm holding out hope that, again, they're giving Obsidian the money to make an Elder Scrolls-sized fantasy RPG. I would love to be playing this in, let's say, 2.5 years from now, at the earliest, probably. Let's see here. It's regarding this game, I believe it was this game or some other games. I don't know. Again, this is just an example of the language that I heard, describing games as being built from the ground up to take full advantage of the Xbox Series X. Oh yeah, I think it was Avowed. Listen to that again. Built from the ground up to take full advantage of the Xbox Series X. Not built from the ground up for the Xbox Series X, exclusively for the Xbox Series X. So I'm wondering to myself, are they still not going to make this game? I mean, I understand about the games Obsidian was already working on when they were purchased by Microsoft, but this was reportedly, when they were bought by Microsoft, what they told Microsoft they wanted to make next, but they hadn't started on. They just wanted to make this game next. And so why would they not say that this is exclusively for the Series X, or at least exclusively for Xbox consoles? They didn't get around to that narrow of language in this presentation until after we got past Avowed. It was later on that a spokesperson said, all of the games you're about to see are being built to launch exclusively on Xbox consoles. Again, that's very, I guess, conservative language. To launch exclusively on Xbox consoles. So they ultimately did not commit. I mean, even in their wording about Halo Infinite, which surely is only going to be coming to Xbox consoles and PC at the most. It's not going to be coming to Nintendo and PlayStation, is it? That wouldn't make any sense to me. So my guess is in all of this that at least some of these games will be exclusive forever to the Xbox family of consoles and PC at the most, but they will not be coming to PlayStation, they will not be coming to Nintendo consoles. But that they're keeping the language vague at this point so that they can remain flexible in what they decide to do for the sake of their company and how they can best make money and be profitable, you know. And I don't fault them for that. I mean, that's just how businesses function and how they succeed and give us more of the kinds of things we want from them. So, but it is still a little bit like, I don't want to say frustrating, just kind of confusing, like, how does this help me decide what console to get? Because I'm not interested in Game Pass. I'm very particular about the games that I play. I'm going to want to buy just those games, and often I'll try to wait for them to be on sale so that I'm not even paying the full price for them. So I'm just a very conservative spender, as much as I can be these days, with my work requiring me to review a lot more games and sometimes purchase games a lot sooner than I would. But in any case, I'm just not their target audience for Game Pass. And so it's going to be the exclusives. It's going to be the experiences, the game experiences I can only have on Xbox that are going to lead me to buy that console if I someday do. The last game that was kind of a blip on my radar was Fable. So this is with the first we've seen of any kind of visuals of the new Fable game that's been rumored, and I think it's been confirmed before now, that is in development. Not by the same studio, I don't believe, as the original games, but certainly they are aiming for the same spirit based on the humor in the trailer. I mean, it's a fantasy RPG, and I like fantasy RPGs, but I never quite connected with the Fable games. I gave them a good try, and it just never quite stuck the landing for me. But even so, in the right scenario, at the right price, maybe when the price for the console has dropped, I could get a discless version, just the cheapest version of the new Xbox console someday, to just play the exclusives that are going to be available on that console, if there are any at all. So, yeah, I think it was a really great showing, and it certainly, more than ever before, has caused me to ask myself, could this be, could PlayStation mess up enough, or not say the right things enough, or not promise me enough between now and the launch of these consoles that I could actually be swayed to buy an Xbox Series X? That's possible. As far as the hardware issues that I had, Xbox has now for years been under better leadership, I think, and it just makes absolute sense to me that they would never want to allow a console to launch with the hardware problems of the Xbox 360, that they would recognize that would just be catastrophic for them. And so I'm oddly enough more willing to give them a shot, give them a try, but again, it's going to depend on those exclusives. So just stamp a big "we'll see" on this one as far as I'm concerned. All right, that's all I've got for now. I'd love to get your thoughts in the comments below. What are you thinking after this presentation? Were you an Xbox 360 player who got burned and moved to PlayStation, or are you already an Xbox fan? What's your backstory, and what does that lead you to think and wonder about the current promises and projections for the new Xbox console? I'd love to get any thoughts that you want to share in the comments below. And then I hope you'll join us soon over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.
Do you believe in the supernatural?
Download the Legacy Edition of Spirit Blade, a full past audio drama, for free at spiritblade.com.